Welcome to Ask the Tech Coach, brought to you by the TeacherCast Educational Network. If you are in charge of professional development and looking to build an innovative digital learning experience, this is the podcast for you. Join us each week as we uncover strategies that tech coaches are using to drive their digital transformations one classroom at a time. And now for your host, with over 2 decades of experience working with tech coaches and ed tech companies from all around the world, Jeff Bradbury.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the TeacherCast Educational Network. My name is Jeff Bradbury. Thank you so much for joining us today and making TeacherCast your place for professional development. This is Ask the Tech Coach podcast, episode number 226, and today we have probably one of our more important topics that we've covered in a long time. My question today for you is, what do you do if your school is under emergency? What do you do in a time of crisis? How can us as coaches, how can we as coaches help our school districts, our principals, our school community become better prepared for when things happen? Doesn't matter if there's a school shooting, a pandemic, an internal crisis, somebody falls in the hallway. How do we make sure that we're all safe? That's going to be the topic today. I've got 3 great guests on the show today, all to talk about their experience with crisis, with emergency. And we're going to talk today about how we can prepare our schools, how we can prepare each other, and how we can prepare our communities. I hope you guys are doing okay out there. It has been a great fall already into that second marking period. Hope you had a chance also to head on over to askthetechcoach.com. Recently redone the entire website, brand new face, brand new blog post, brand new podcasts, and there's a lot more stuff coming on. So I hope you guys have a chance to check all that stuff out. It's been great seeing how the newsletter's been growing. It's nice seeing how the social media is growing. And if you haven't had a chance to yet, head on over to askthetechcoach.com, scroll down to the bottom, and join one of our instructional coaching networks. We've got a great place of more than 1,200 coaches over on Facebook. We got a LinkedIn version if you want to be more professional. And we've also got one for digital learning leaders over on k12leaders.com. Lots of great stuff for you as an instructional coach. And as the calendar is coming to a close and we're getting ready for 2023, we are absolutely just getting started. My first guest today is an associate professor of early childhood and special education. I want to welcome today Miss Susan Shapiro onto the program. Susan, welcome to Ask the Tech Coach.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Thank you so much for being here. Tell us a little bit more about yourself. What are you doing these days?
Well, I just wrote a book, which is called Interpreting COVID-19 Through Turbulence Theory. So that's been really exciting. I teach at Toro College in the Graduate School of Education. And I've been doing a lot of research into crisis. So I'm very excited to talk about it.
I'm so excited about this topic. Thanks so much for being here. My next guest is a director and faculty development and outreach at a private school, Miss Melissa Jackson. Melissa, how are you today? Welcome to Ask the Tech Coach.
Hello. Thank you so much.
I'm so excited that you're here today. Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
So I am in charge of the professional development for special education teachers here in New York City. I'm also an adjunct assistant professor in a graduate program, early childhood special education. And much like Dr. Shapiro, I do a lot of research in the area of school safety, school emergencies for children with disabilities, specifically young children.
Thanks so much for being here. Looking forward to this great conversation and joining us again on this show. I want to bring on my good friend, Mr. John Miller. John, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Jeff, and thanks for inviting me. I'm looking forward to participating in another one of your podcasts. The last one was really good. I enjoyed being here, and I'm looking forward to hearing what these other educators have to say.
John, you and I have a history together of doing some great things in school districts. Tell us a little bit about your background here, because, as I mentioned at the top of the show, we're talking all about schools, crisis, keeping people safe, making sure that everything is where it needs to be. Tell us a little bit about your background in education.
Thanks, Jeff. So I come from a different angle than the other 2 educators do, much more on a practical side, I would say. I was in law enforcement for 31 years. I retired as a police captain. Through a good part of my policing training and time, I was involved with school security from the protection side, working with the school district. When I retired, I started working for a regional school district in northern New Jersey. I worked there for 6 years, and I am now currently a director of emergency management and security for a hospital that is in the northern New Jersey area.
Thank you all for being here. This is obviously a very important topic for educators, for coaches, for anybody, parents included with all of this stuff. Let's just open the door here and start talking about this. You know, the concept of schools being in crisis, the concept of schools being prepared. Every single week we turn on the television and we see something in the news. Are our schools prepared for crisis, whether that be internal, external, community, medical? Melissa, I see you're shaking your head on this one. What do you think, globally or even locally where you are our schools prepared for the unknown?
I think it depends on how you define prepared, right? Some schools have these elaborate plans, right? But they're not necessarily training everybody in the building or training the children to respond as well. Some schools do practice with private companies, and they involve local law enforcement, and they practice drills. But the reality of it is, when a shooting happens, right, it's not going to happen the exact same way that a drill happens. So when we're thinking about schools being prepared, teachers being prepared, administrators, children being prepared, I don't think we can fully say that we are prepared for a variety of reasons.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's an interesting point, is about always being prepared for the last emergency. And I think what we really need to think about is a different kind of mindset for educators, for training teachers and training administrators when it comes to dealing with crisis. So, you know, during 9/11, no one was expecting what was going on. And part of my research was what happened in daycare centers that were in close proximity to the World Trade Center. And no one had prepared for it, but some centers came out just they could handle it. They were able to roll with the punches. They had community outreach. People knew that they were there. One of the schools that I studied, the fire department, they had just been to the fire department. The fire department knew they were there. They had visited the local police department. They knew they were there. And so the outreach was tremendous. As the towers were falling, people knew, we got to get the daycare center out of there. We got to get the kids out. And so by preparing people for sort of the unexpected, getting them in that mindset of what do we do when crisis occurs, I think they're going to be a lot more successful.
And I have to agree. Dr. Shapiro's right on the money here. It's getting the education out to the faculty and the staff. Having a paper plan in a binder that's sitting on a shelf doesn't do you any good. It's they need to know what to do. They need to know how to react in a multitude of circumstances. And they need to know where they need to go. The teachers will follow whatever instruction that they're giving. The students will follow that teacher. They're looking up to the teacher for the education, for the direction that the teacher's going to give them. We can't train them for every possible circumstance, like Melissa said. There's just so much out there. But we can give them the basics to use. And that's where I think support from a lot of different sources come in here. So one of the things that we need to be able to do is to take the plans that we have in writing in that binder and put it in an accessible means for the teacher. How can they best get that information out to them? And I think some of that is through technology.
How so?
So we need to take the plans and bring them from a paper document to from a paper document to a live document, so that these teachers can look at it. If they move from one section to another, from one building to another, all they have to do is pick up their phone and look at it, and they can have the information that they need, critical information at that moment.
But Jonathan, I wonder if the plans themselves are so static that teachers have a hard time when they don't follow the sort of menu of how crisis is going to happen, because I know that we have fire drills, we have lockdown drills, we have active shooter drills for kids. But I know Dr. Jackson, your work is on a lot of this. But are the kids really going to know how to react? Are the teachers really going to know how to react? Or do we want to have them in more of a mindset of how do we deal with crisis? What's the best way for teachers to be prepared for the unexpected? And what's more of a global way of making sure that everyone's safe?
I think, yeah.
That might sound a little esoteric, but what I mean is building those supports into the school right from the beginning.
I believe it's having the basics. So if you give the teachers what they need for a fire drill, for a lockdown drill, for a shelter-in-place bomb threat, whatever it may be, give them the basics, but give them the ability to adjust it as necessary.
Yeah.
So that if the plan is we're going to lock down in our classroom, but if you had the ability to run to a safe location, that may be the best alternative for you. But you at least have your basics in place, and they need to know what those and be comfortable with those.
Let's talk a little bit about that, because John, as a law enforcement person, you train and train and train, and you just become naturalized to, when something happens, this is how you react. And we've had these conversations. As a teacher, we do, if we're lucky, 2 drills a month, and it lasts all of 10 minutes at that moment. And all we get was, we get good, bad, fix. We don't get, okay, let's fix and try it again immediately. And between the fire drills and the shelter in places and all of those different things, how can a teacher or any employee know exactly what to do when we only have maybe 10 minutes a month to really be thinking about this?
I think what Jonathan said was really interesting about giving teachers the ability to make decisions. Because I think sometimes we get so caught up in what's going on with our written drills that when you have a situation, they're going to have to figure out how to react. And they're going to have to feel empowered enough that they know if there's an active shooter, they're locking down with the kids and the kids are screaming, best to get those kids out of there. And they have to feel they're empowered enough to be able to say, I'm going to make this decision right now. We're taking the kids out.
Well, I think we've also run into some big changes in the environment. In New Jersey, the law has been very, very direct. You will lock down. You will follow the plans that the state, the DOE has set forth, and that's really good. And the plans are very effective. But I think we've also kind of learned, especially with some of the more recent school shootings, that there have been vulnerabilities both on the terms of the school districts and of the responding law enforcement agencies who have come in. And now parents have kind of gone to a different extreme, and they're taking measures on their own. They're not waiting for law enforcement to make the scene safe. They're trying to go in and rescue, as it may be, their students, their children on their own. And I think that's become more of the norm now. It puts a lot of people at risk. I don't advocate that because most of these law enforcement agencies train very, very hard and are very, very responsive to whatever circumstance that they have.
I think it's important also when we're thinking about training our teachers, thinking about not only training them on how to respond to a lockdown, a fire drill, a mudslide, any of that, but also training them on how to teach their learners and the various learners in our schools. You know, some kids are going to be able to follow directions and be flexible and transition and stay quiet for 5 minutes to 2 hours. Some kids will not be able to do that, right? So training our teachers, especially our special education teachers, to prioritize what they're teaching throughout the year. Think about the skills that you need during a lockdown. You need to follow multiple step directions, be flexible in transition, stay quiet, occupy yourself for a while. how can we work on some of those executive function goals throughout the school year as not just part of the lockdown drill? I think there's two pieces in there, the teacher training and then training the teachers to teach.
And it's also, equipment is very important. Working in early childhood, we were dealing with babies and trying to get babies out of a building, during a fire drill was extremely problematic and difficult. And so we invested in the fire cribs, but how many babies can you put into a fire crib and then roll it out of the building without it collapsing and causing more of an issue? So really having the resources and being able to use the resources effectively and having practice with them as well.
I think one of the other aspects is, I think, Dr. Jackson, you touched on it, was the special learner, the autistic child who, when you're given instruction, whether it's law enforcement coming in and giving commands, a fire alarm going off, how is that individual reacting? And we all know, because we've worked with it, you more so than certainly I have, but it requires a special, whether it's headphones or some other means to make that child feel more comfortable, because they've been ripped out of their environment that they react well to, and that they've become now startled and they're not going to listen to law enforcement instructions. They may go running right towards that law enforcement officer because that child has been told that person's your friend. Meanwhile, the law enforcement wants nothing to do with it. They have a mission that they're trying to accomplish here. So it's very, very difficult. There were some circumstances, because as Jeff can attest to, we had a large special needs population in the school, and we would have to make certain accommodations for those kids. Even though it went against everything that we wanted to do, it was in the best interest of the child that we did that. So they would get a little heads up of a drill coming. So maybe they put headphones on or gave them some advance warning. And those teachers need to know how to react as well. They may be outside on the playground with the student. Do I bring the student inside? Do we run away? We also had a pretty large pre-K program, not babies, but the pre-K. How do you walk with those children if there is an evacuation? They can't walk very quickly. So there's a lot of moving parts to it, but there's also the need for the constant education beyond what Jeff had said. It needs to be, in my opinion, constantly reinforced, and it's difficult. There are so many requirements that are pushed on the faculty and the staff of each school, and now we're adding many more. Now we're also having you be trained for a critical event. You signed up to be a teacher, not to run fire drills or to evacuate students. But all these things come into play here. So they need the education on it.
Let's dive into that. If you are coming into a school building, John, like you have, how do you start from scratch to put together a safety plan for a school, a building, a daycare? What are some of the things that educational leaders need to be thinking about when they're putting this together? What are some of the tools that they need to have around them? Maps, blueprints, whatever it happens to be. Where do you start? And how do you go from that to, okay, now I'm going to train my staff?
Well, I think it's taking a really close look at your community. So it's not just making the assumption that everyone is in a K through 12 school, that everyone is going to be able-bodied enough to walk with the children outside of the school, getting to know your teachers, getting to know the community around, and taking a good look at your students. And you're going to have to tailor it to the children and the community that's within the schools. So it's not a one-size-fits-all.
Mm-hmm. It's first looking at the culture and climate of the school, exactly what you're saying. What are the needs of that particular building? Yes, you can do a blanket plan, but you have to tailor it towards any one particular building. We had one that had a much higher population of autistic children, so there were special needs that we needed to have for that one particular school. And then we need to get that message out to everybody. So yes, maps are great, but again, they're required. We need to have fire drill exit plans, but we need to make sure that they know, the teachers know what to do. Students will follow. The teachers have to be well educated, and that may mean new teacher orientation. It may be a periodic faculty meeting, so you can get in front of the faculty and the staff and the administration so that they know what's required. A lot of different
I'm not
areas.
sure if the children will always follow, though. It depends on the age group, because when we're talking early childhood and toddlers and babies, especially kids with special needs, they may not follow, and they have to know that in advance. So what's the plan? And, I had also worked in a daycare where we had no walls, and the rooms were these half walls. So when we had to do an active shooter drill, we actually had to put the babies into a freight elevator and bring the freight elevator down. So we had to think outside the box, knowing that we didn't have the ability to do what every other school was able to do.
And did you practice that with the children?
We did. We did. And they would certainly not hide from anyone. Everyone would know they were in a freight elevator for sure, but at least it gave us some place to take the children.
And that's smart. It's smart pre-planning. I commend you for that. I think that's a great way to think on all these situations. One of the lectures that I listened to was Michelle Gay, Sandy Hook. And I listened to her. She presented to an association I was with. And when the kids had come out of the school, fire alarm had activated, and they walked right past the front of the school because that was the route that they were told that they have to take every time there's a fire drill. This is the way you go. There was no consideration for, they were on their own, these young children. There was no consideration for anything beyond that. And so the children also need to know, if there's danger here, don't go this way. It's a lot. Your situation is completely unique with infants. That's completely a very difficult situation to look at.
I think when it comes to implementing these plans, training our teachers, we need to practice. I think there are some views out there, right, that we should not practice this, especially in early childhood special education. But what we do know is practice does help aid in supporting kids to gain these skills, to be able to follow these multiple step directions, respond during these crises. I think it's important that we practice with the teachers, the teacher assistants. There's paraprofessionals in classrooms. What about the speech and language pathologists, OTs? Everybody within the school building needs to be trained, and that includes the children. How do we teach children to respond to an active shooter in a developmentally appropriate way? It's really, really hard. I can imagine Dr. Shapiro trying to teach infants going into a freight elevator, how hard that was, right? But going back to what I was saying before, if we practice these kind of overarching skills that can lend themselves to the scenarios, and we teach our teachers to teach those, I think that can go a long way.
Is there anything coming down the pipe in Congress that says we should be doing this more often? John would correct me. Is the law twice a month? And, if we are going to be needing to train it, should it be once a week? I mean, what is happening in not the education world that's maybe pushing down that says, should we be doing these things? Because I'm still going to jump back and say, as a teacher, I'm only concerned about this for 10 minutes a month when the bell goes off, right? Like, obviously, it's always in the back of my mind as somebody who's traveling to 25 buildings. I mean, even the other day, and I was talking to John about this too, I made sure that all of my coaches were inputted into Raptor in all of their buildings. And for me, that was my way of keeping my people safe. That way the system knew who they were and where they are. Is there anything that's being talked about in law or in Congress or wherever that says we should be doing this more than twice a month, or we need to have a dedicated PD day for the kids where a half a day, maybe twice a year, is just building safety or crisis safety?
In New Jersey, it's one fire drill, it's one school security drill every month. I think it's very difficult if you tried to go beyond that, because there are so many requirements that every district has that they're trying to fit in there, and to take a lot more time away from the educational side of it to do these drills, to do this education is difficult. I tried to get out in front of the students at least in the beginning of every school year, all the different grade levels, grade appropriate education. You know, most of the kids, once they get into the high school, they look at it and they're like, this is just a waste of time. This is ridiculous. But in New Jersey, I believe it was 2016, we had a shooting at one of the malls, and there were very heroic kids who pulled adults into their stores that they were working at because they had received this basic training in their schools, because they knew what to do for a lockdown. And so they took what they learned at school and they said, wow, this is real life. We need to go into lockdown. And they took the appropriate action. So it works. I think they are learning from this. I think not everybody takes it seriously, because there's a lot of attitude of it's not going to happen here. And for the most part, they're right. But as we've seen time and time again throughout the country, whether it's a mall, whether it's a church, a supermarket, it does happen. And it happens in a small suburban community or in a large urban environment. It does not have any prejudice about where it's going. And so the training is important. I don't see it going beyond, at this point, regulatory manner, going beyond where we're at. But, it's a big push for me. I'm a big advocate of this. Even though I'm in a different environment, I am still teaching right now in the way I had for the staff of the hospitals. This is so important today.
It's an interesting thing to think about, and even this conversation here is getting me thinking. One of the things that I do is new employee orientation. Every single week, we're bringing in half dozen, 10 people a week, and let's say tomorrow something happens in a school. There's a lot of new educators in these buildings that don't have the background, don't have the training. What happens? And standing up and John, I've seen you do this. You come to a new employee orientation and go, here's the rules. It's not preparing, right? I mean, like you do have to have some of that hands-on stuff to make sure that everybody is going on. I want to pick up on something that everybody had said, which is about the community. Can we kind of share what are the guidelines for letting your community go, whether you're be at a daycare or a K-12 building or a high school, whatever it happens to be? What are some of the things that you can't say to parents? What are some of the things you should be saying to parents? And I keep saying this is the stuff that John and I have been talking about, but what can you make available to parents? I mean, obviously parents need to know that there is a plan, but you can't show them the map. So what are the guidelines for working with the community and showing off things to the community?
Well, I think parents have to know that they're going to eventually hear from you, and be given some type of a timeline, even if it's not necessarily something you can stick to. I'm a parent, and I can't imagine if there was something going on in the school and I couldn't find out information. I think the same thing would be going through my head, is jump on the train and get there as fast as I can. So there has to be a way that we make parents feel that they're empowered in this process, while at the same time, put the kids number one. Make sure that the kids and the safety of the kids and the teachers is really what it's all about. We'll communicate when we can. That's a buildup of trust, and that takes a long time to create those school home partnerships where parents can trust enough that we are going to tell you what's happening as soon as we are able.
I think communication is absolutely key. And then when it comes, just speaking from the early childhood special education perspective, when we can, administrators, teachers should be working on some of those individualized aspects that you were talking about, John, the headphones, having an activity the child could do for their children with special needs that are in their classrooms. From the get-go, you have a child in your classroom in September, you're starting to do your emergency planning and practice. Talk to the families about what the child likes to do. Hey, parent, if your child has to wait for a really long time somewhere, a doctor's office, what do? We can gain some really great insight to provide some of that individualization. A parent that I spoke to once let me know that their child has a jar of frosting in the classroom in the event that there's a lockdown. Their child has a hard time staying quiet and waiting for a long period of time, but given a jar of frosting, they will take little bites for as long as, it takes them to finish it. And some people say, okay, you're going to let a child eat a jar of frosting. In the event of an emergency, I think the frosting would be the better choice, right?
It's being innovative. Yeah. I think you're being innovative with that, and it does. The communication side is critical. I echo what everybody has just said. Part of the problem is the misinformation. So especially as you get into middle school, high school, these students are communicating with their parents. They're live streaming. They're putting Instagram videos out on what's going on and their reactions within the school. Before the administration of the school has a minute to draft something to get out to parents, the kids have already posted it all over the place. So it may be accurate, and it may be totally inaccurate just from their perspective. What somebody may believe is gunshots may have been something that just fell over as they were, exiting a room. So it's very hard to say. We need to have that trust. We need to be able to say our administration, our school resource officers, our teachers have been trained. They know what to do. And I know, Jeff, part of this is to talk about the technology of it. There are a lot of technological tools that are out there. You mentioned Raptor, which is a visitor access management system, but there are a lot of different notification tools that are, can notify parents, can notify the teachers, they notify the police departments right away. So, while the technology is great, it really, in many ways, it does just come down to we need to have the basics. The teachers need to know what to do. The staff need to be able to support whatever's going on. Start with your basics.
Where is the line when it comes to sending out information? Right? On our website, we have a plan. This is what the plan is. We'll call you. I keep saying this again, but John and I were talking about, clearly you can't put the roadmap that says where will the kids be walking to get from point A to the shelter school, but what can be said to the parents, what shouldn't be said?
Well, I think if you tell them ahead of time, you sort of negate the effectiveness of the drills. I mean, you're really not supposed to tell parents when these things are occurring. At the same time, parents get really upset when they don't know, especially with early childhood and kids with special needs. They get really, really angry when they're not told ahead of time about these drills. And so it's sort of a lose proposition. But I go back to building those partnerships, because the more that they trust you, the more they're going to think that you're doing it in the best interest of the kids and the best interest of the school. And that's really what's important and critical.
It's a hard one, right? Because you aren't really supposed to tell the students or the parents when it's going to happen. And it's a shock, right? For everyone involved. I think also when you can be transparent about the verbiage that you're using with the children or the students, right? So if you're calling the drill a lockdown drill, an active shooter drill, in early childhood, are you calling it the big bad wolf drill? If you're calling it something like that, making sure that the parents know. So when their kid comes home and says, oh, we did the big bad wolf, a man had a gun. That they know that what you're talking about and they're not in shock when you can.
When it comes to trust, and I want to pick this up because I think many of you had mentioned it already. Where are we in this country with trust when it comes to law enforcement helping work? So, one of you had even mentioned, lots of parents are going to run into the school to pick up their kid if they need to, because that's what the parent needs to do. In the shadow or in the wake of Texas, does anybody want to comment on where are we with trusting those who are being empowered to keep us safe when there is a crisis that's happening in our schools?
Many years ago, we did a town hall forum in the police department where I had worked at the school. I was representing the police there, but we had the educators there. Part of our school crisis committee was there. And we invited everybody to come in and to learn what we felt comfortable educating them about. I think we had more people from the local press there than we had parents who were concerned, and it was sad because we were there to take that opportunity to say, this is the measures we're doing to keep your kids safe. We would go to back to school nights. Again, I would represent the police department there, and a member of the school's team would be with me. And a few parents would come over and talk to us. Again, this is probably 8 years ago or so. Has things changed? Yeah, dramatically. And I think for the most part, there is great trust in the law enforcement partners. There's unfortunate circumstances, and we saw what happened, that trust is lost. And it's very difficult to build that trust back up again. And that becomes educating again, doing what you can to get parents educated on what's going on in your school, giving them some basics of what will be done for a drill. These are the drills that we do. This is how often. This is what your child will be exposed to. You cannot opt out of it. Yes, if you have special needs, we're going to work with you to address those needs because that's important. And then there are a lot of those needs there. And they need to be done at different times because you had mentioned about, paras and the aides that are there. A lockdown drill occurring during a elementary school lunch period is very different than when in a classroom or at changing times. So, the atmosphere needs to be looked at, the trust needs to be rebuilt again, and we need to, keep moving forward with this.
I absolutely agree. And you hit the nail on the head that it needs to be rebuilt. And I think also when we think about building those partnerships again and involving families in this even more, even if we can train them and give them some of the basics of how to respond if this happens in the community, because honestly, that's happening too. It can happen at the supermarket, at the mall, et cetera. So let's just start from scratch.
And it can't happen when the actual emergency happens. That's not when you start building these relationships. It has to happen ahead of time. Absolutely. So that they can depend on the people who are there to protect their kids.
As this show is designed for instructional coaches, people who get a chance to not, necessarily be in one classroom, but in all classrooms, instructional coaches get a chance to work with our school safety resource officers, our principals, our paras. We are the ones that run all around the building. What can coaches do to support law enforcement, school resource officers, our principals, our administration? What are some of the things that we can be doing to help keep our buildings safe, to help keep our staff and children safe, either A, when the crisis happens, or B, in helping to prepare? And John, please feel free to, include some of the stuff that you and I have worked on, because we've done a lot of stuff in here. But how can we as coaches help support our staff, students, and administration to either to prepare or for when something actually is happening?
I think creating a timeline is going to be very important so that, you start to work with law enforcement, you're working with the teachers in the school, you're working with administration to come up with a timeline so that these things are introduced throughout the year so that people know how many, so that we already have on schedule that the parents will get to meet the safety officers or the officers coming into the school, that they'll know how many drills will occur during the course of the year so that the communication is already there with things like Remind or any type of communication technology that may be used so that you help everyone prepare for moving forward, for creating this timeline and setting up communications.
I think that's a huge point. And I think looking at preparing the teachers, also preparing, as we were talking about, the paraprofessionals, the school work, the cafeteria workers, all of that. John, you were talking about making the information accessible. Sometimes those paraprofessionals, cafeteria workers, they're only there for a certain shift. They aren't paid for prep time after, so they're not coming to the PD, right? Maybe they will, but maybe they won't, right? So also having multiple modalities of training everybody, I think, is a crucial part. So having the practice, having the plan written out, illustrated, accessible through whatever app or Google Classroom you're using, having visuals associated with it, if you can, on a lanyard, things like that. And John, I see you shaking your head about that.
Yeah. The different ways are important. I came into this, and I think this is the tech coach side of it. I came into the schools, I would have to say, kind of old school. I was looking for a flip chart. We put it on the wall. It's right there so you can see it. And in working with Jeff as my tech coach, he's like, let's take that and let's put that into a Google site. Let's recreate it. Here, what's your information? So I would write my information. We started something very small. It grew exponentially. And what I created has been so well received. And when I've shown it to individuals at the state level, they were absolutely amazed by the detail of video, a short video of something. But it worked so well. And because of the way it was set up, I could do it mobilely. So if I had to move those children from one building to another and I didn't know where to go, all I had to do was go to the evacuation page, look at that school, find where I needed to go. The map was there. Now, this is all assuming that your self-service is not overwhelmed, but it could be interactive map, so that it kind of knew where you were and could tell you which direction you had to head to get to that alternate location. Huge pluses, and without the tech coach, I would have not even approached this. So, my aspect of it is, here's my idea. How do I put that into a usable format? That I gave it to the tech coach. Jeff, make it happen.
Essentially, when we put the site together, in my mind, I was pretending that I was building a mobile app. I wasn't building a website. I was building something with huge buttons. So that way on a phone, you could click on an icon and then get to the next place, and click on a big icon and get to the next place. So that way you're not scrolling through like text menus while emergencies are happening. It was something that was very easy. And if you're out there going, how do I help out my school? How do I help out my school resource officer? I think the easiest answer is ask. What can you do? That's how John and I started our friendship, is what do you need? Or, hey, I see you're doing this. How can I be a part of this? I want to make sure my school is safe. And from there grew all of these different plans. And, as instructional coaches, we are the ones that are sitting there with, the secrets to how to make the spreadsheets and the Google Docs and the websites and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Offer your nurse. How do you make a resource for everybody to battle the pandemic, or to, whatever it happens to be? Just going up to these people and asking. Our role is teacher training. That doesn't just mean classroom teachers. That means everybody on the roster needs our support, needs our help, needs something that we have. Offer it to them. And I'm so glad that John and I had a chance to do that. And anybody else out there, reach out to these people and just say, what can I do to support you? It's no different than walking into 5th grade and saying, what are some of your pain points? How can I fix that? How can I help make the school district a little bit safer? Guys, I want to say thank you. I mean, I'd love to call this part 1 of a longer show and do this and maybe even expand the panel here. Melissa, let me give you, last round here. What advice do you have for anybody in a coaching position, in a leadership position on this topic? What can we be thinking about as we wrap up our show today?
I think it's really important. Administrators, coaches, train your teachers, train everybody in the school building. Not only train them how to respond to the drill, but also how to teach children in their classrooms to respond to those drills, collaborate with the families. And I think working on those foundational skills throughout the year with all students would be beneficial for everybody involved and would transcend even outside of lockdown drills and emergency situations. I think practice with general education students, practice with students with IEPs, practice with everybody, teachers separately, children separately, everybody together. I think that needs to happen.
Susan, what do you think? Les?
I think that we need, as coaches, to help people think about the larger community, how to open up the discussion so that it's not just involving the schools, but help them to think of the resources that the school has in the immediate area, in the community, and how they can rely on those during times of crisis.
John, as we prepare for the next big thing in educational safety and security, what's always on the back of your mind as a school resource officer, as a law enforcement professional? What should coaches and leaders be thinking about to make sure that the next opportunity for a crisis is not in their own schools?
I think a huge part of this is the documents need to be up to date. They need to be current. A live working document is going to be better than your paper document. So that way, you mentioned the pandemic. That changed the way we did a lot of our lockdown drills. There may be something else around the corner, whether it's evacuation because of heavy snow on a roof and we have to move students. And they need to be able to look at that, and we need to be able to change that document to fit the need as we can. It's difficult. The size of the buildings matter. We have, I know, been in schools where you have, 3,000-4,000 students in a high school. It's difficult for them to pivot. But we have to be able to make those changes. We have to be able to look at the circumstances that we're in today, make a change, and keep it going, keep educating. Everything that both of the other two panelists have said here is, I agree 100% with. We're constantly reinventing it. And I think that also the tech coaches, they need to work with you to help make sure that it's kept current.
If it's one thing that we talk about on this show, it's, the role of the instructional coach is not just guide on the side in the classroom. You are, if anything else, an educational leader in your building. Take the time to go meet your school resource officer, get a chance to meet with your principal, your administration team, ask them the questions. What happens during a lockdown from your point of view? What do you need to do? You never know when something's going to happen and maybe they're not in the building and you're somebody that can step up to the plate and make sure that your teachers, staff, and students are available and where they need to be. So if you have any questions about this, please feel free to reach out. Like I said earlier, I would love to do this as a part one of several parts. This is such an important topic. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out over on AskTheTechCoach.com. This is going to be episode number 226. We would love to get some feedback. And if this is a topic that's good for you, we would love to have you as a guest on here. Melissa, where do we go to find out more about the great things that you're doing? How do we get in touch with you?
You can email me at msmeljackson@gmail.com. and check out some of my research that will hopefully be published soon. But I have a chapter in Dr. Shapiro's most recent book.
Dr. Shapiro, where can we learn more about the great things you're doing?
You can email me at susanhshapiro@gmail.com, and you can look for my book.
John, how do we get in touch with you if you need anything?
I've just started a Miller Consulting group, so I am out doing school security consulting evaluations and so on. I will soon have my email out there, so I'll provide that to you at some point, Jeff.
We'll make sure that we have links to all this great stuff and Dr. Shapiro's book on our links. Of course, this is going to be episode number 226. And one more time, guys, thank you. If this show meant anything to you, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and please share this with your friends. On behalf of Melissa, Susan, and John, and everybody here in the TeacherCast Educational Network, my name is Jeff Bradbury, reminding you guys to keep up the great work in your classroom and continue sharing your passions with your students.
You've been listening to Ask the Tech Coach, hosted by Jeff Bradbury of the TeacherCast Educational Network. Please reach out to the show with all of your questions on Twitter at AskTheTechCoach or online at www.askthetechcoach.com. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss any future episodes. And please take a moment to write a review in the App Store.